Man, sales is tough. I'm just not cut out to be a salesperson. Have you ever felt that way? Selling doesn't need to be so difficult. My name is Harry Spate. I'm here to serve and to help you succeed. Join me as we discuss sales made easy.
My phone, doing my best to try and reschedule this webinar, pushing the boundaries of the capabilities of this phone. And the nurse on staff at that time, they were checking my blood every hour, and she comes over to me and she takes my readings. And interestingly, my numbers had been coming down over the last 2 days. They were still relatively high, but much more reasonable. She takes my blood sugars at that point, and it's like a 90-degree angle. My blood is skyrocketing up high, and so it was my response to stress.
Wow.
And she says to me, complete stranger, she says to me, kind of like as a matter of factly, she says, you realize this is what put you in the hospital bed in the first place. And that was my epiphany moment, because I realized if I didn't do anything about my health now, I probably won't be around much longer.
What is the good word? Boy, dude, I have a special guest with me today. It is a fellow that is known on LinkedIn. I don't know about the rest of his life, but on LinkedIn, he's known as Professor Pete Alexander. And I've been connected with Professor Pete for a couple of years now. He is a genuinely nice guy and a guy that fits in very well with the Selling with Dignity sales model, and also on Sales Made Easy, because he's easygoing, easy to like, and you can tell he's a person who is a real giver. Am I right so far, Professor Pete?
Well, Harry, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to try and meet those expectations.
Well, there's even more. So Professor Pete is a fellow that is all about helping people deal with stress relief, stress management. And by the way, he's also providing some great business insights. And he's got a great background in sales and marketing too. So we can go anywhere today. And I'm a little, not intimidated is not the right word, but I'm wondering where my brain is going to go. And so be ready. So Professor Pete, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, what I did was I started early in my career in sales. My first job out of college was with FedEx, and what a wonderful company to start your sales career in, because they invested so much training in me and knowledge, product and soft skills capabilities. They really did wonders for my confidence as a salesperson. And then I got recruited to go into pharmaceutical sales. And I did that for a couple of years. And then after that, I got recruited into a small medical device company by the owner of that company, who was also a doctor whose office I was calling on in pharmaceuticals. So it's all about the relationships. And so early in my career, the sales was a key driver of my career. Even before I graduated college, I was working as a salesperson for the now defunct Radio Shack. I ran a local store, did all the sales for them. So, been there, done that, done a lot of sales things, and then transitioned, as I like to say it, to the dark side and went into marketing. And what's interesting is that when I went into marketing, the thing is that you think, okay, you're not going to be in sales. Well, the only difference was that I didn't have my quota, but I absolutely had my numbers that I needed to hit from the salespeople in
Hmm.
order in terms of either the product or solution that I was selling or the company overall, whatever the products were. We absolutely had to make sure that the salespeople were successful. Otherwise, we were not going to be successful. And it always shocked me having to either work for companies or hear about or have some of my peers talk about companies where the sales and marketing departments were not aligned. It
Hmm.
just it's crazy because why not work together in order to make everybody successful versus being siloed and work against each other. It didn't make sense to me.
Wow. Yeah. So great background. And so, yeah, I totally agree on this on the sales and marketing um, opposite ends of the table, so to speak. And, one group saying the other one doesn't get their hands dirty, and the other one saying, well, these people don't know what to do with a lead when I give them a great lead, right? They
Right.
couldn't close a door. So,
It,
yes, there is that that's definitely going on, probably in a ton of organizations. But one of the things you said early on was you're learning the soft skills of sales at a company like FedEx. And I would think that would be a complete numbers game. So, do you mind just sharing a little bit about that, what those soft skills were and how valuable they were to you?
Yeah, it was interesting. We got pounded into us a particular sales methodology. In fact, it had the acronym of APCOM, which is the A for acceptance, or building rapport, and then there's the purpose statement, then probing, then there's the consulting, overcoming objections, and then motivating somebody to act.
Wow, did that
So
stick
that
with you or what?
Oh, I told you
we're
they.
talking we're talking a little while ago, right?
Yeah, that was back in. I went to work for them in 1989. So, and
Okay.
I didn't even prepare for
Yeah.
this interview. So that's how much it's been pounded into me. But I used it, and
Yeah.
so they pounded that into us. But then after that, we would come back. So that was originally a 6-week course in Memphis, and then
Hmm.
every 6 months they would bring us back for more soft skills. And the soft skills typically were around being able to notice body language, tone, and conversational aspects where you wanted to be able to be a, a resource to the customer, not just, okay, you got to, sell, 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 sell. And that was what was so um, different for me versus a lot of the my friends, especially who were working for these sweatshops, basically,
Hmm.
where all they had to do is it was all about the number. You had to call. You had to do 30 calls a day or something. The only thing that we had that was a very specific number is we did have our quarterly objective, and obviously annual from that. And then they did want us to make a certain number of physical sales calls a week, which for me, I was working in downtown San Francisco, and with all the skyscrapers, that was a piece of cake for me. I mean, literally, I could blow that out in one day if I needed to,
Right.
in one building.
Yeah. That may be different today, though, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. You're not gonna, right now, if you probably, if you can even get into the building, let alone
Right.
find the decision maker of that. And that was
Right.
something too that was really great about working for a brand name. At
Hmm.
least, when I would do cold calls, at least when I would walk into the office and I said I was with FedEx, and I was always dressed in a suit. That's what they required us to be.
Hmm.
Um, they didn't say who,
Right. Right.
that was one positive. But after that, you just had to be able to respond accordingly, to be able to see whether or not there was an opportunity there to further the dialogue for bringing in our services.
Excellent. So, what would you say? Was it Abcom, whatever it was? Not critical right now, but what would you say you took out of that just stuck with you for your entire career?
You know, um, the thing that I liked most about the experience at FedEx was that you needed to realize that it wasn't just about you. You were representing a company as a overall. And I think that that's the big picture that a lot of these organizations forget, because the salesperson is obviously the customer's first contact, perhaps, into the company, and then it gets passed on to, let's say, a customer service person or account manager. But it's that you need to be a liaison. And what I really liked was the fact that it was all about making sure that you didn't act in a way that would be detrimental to the company brand.
Mm.
And that I really, really liked. And the same thing, that actually was something that during my pharmaceutical experience that followed that, it was the same way. They were really, really wanted to make sure that you were realized that you needed to act appropriately in a good way, not in a negative way, in a good way, because you weren't just representing yourself, you were representing the company. And the reason I say that is because my prior experience with Radio Shack was anything but that.
Okay.
It was crazy.
Give me an example.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
yeah, because they're defunct, so no one
Yes.
cares, right?
Nobody cares. I mean, I was working with people who were coming in drunk. And they were dressed like slobs. They would use really inappropriate language. They
Wow.
would scream at customers.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it was like the wild, wild west of,
Sounds like
basically,
it.
it probably could have been a really great TV show.
Yeah, it sounds like a. It does. It sounds like a crazy sitcom about sales, dysfunctional
Exactly.
sales.
Dysfunctional sales. And I'm not going to say that I never did that, but so one of the funniest things that I remember that I would do, because I worked there for almost 4 years. And so on Christmas Eve, when we finally closed the door to the store on Christmas Eve, that was always a very, very busy day. And of course, a very busy season. Every year that I worked there, they had this obnoxious toy organ that had this this play where you press this one button and it would play the most obnoxious song and stuff. So my tradition at the end of the Christmas season, by end of Christmas Eve, was I would punt that organ after the close of the doors.
You were done.
Exactly. And there was it was something satisfaction about seeing the batteries come flying out of that thing.
All right. So what is that movie? Was that The Office? It escapes me. Where the guy burns the office at the end, burns the building. Office something. Office space. Yes.
Office Space.
So they're bashing.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And they're bashing a printer somewhere in that movie. So
Yep.
yeah. So that was a flashback to that. So yeah. So this you were told recently. I saw a post. I think it was you that we were talking about doing a stand up, and you were doing like. Not stand up, but improv. Well, let's do some office stuff, man. I mean, let's go back to the store, back when you were a kid in Radio Shack and showing up semi-hammered and telling a customer to go fly a kite. And oh my goodness,
it was
good
just
comedy.
good comedy, and it was just so. I mean, and it was from both sides. I mean, I remember one time. So this was again Christmas season, and we were jam packed. I mean, people were lining up left and right. And so I'm working as fast as I possibly can. And I remember, it wasn't just us salespeople who would get stressed, because we'd get customers that would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically this one guy who I said, oh, can I help you? And he says, I need a TV coaxial part. And I said,
Hmm.
and we had a section on there. I said, sure, let me help you. I mean, it's only what maybe a $2 part.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to
Okay.
make any money off of
Yeah.
this, but I'm helping him and I'm being
Yeah.
really professional about it. And I said, so tell me what you want to do. And he blah, blah, blah. He describes it. And he wasn't describing it very well. And he's, and I say, does it look anything like this? Cause visual, hopefully that
Hmm.
somebody would be able to explain it better. I said, does it look something like this? And I show him this part and I'm pointing to one of the ends. And the guy, I remember to this day, I mean, this is back, longer than my Radio Shack days. I mean, we're talking, this is early 80s. And the guy looks at me and he says, I can't believe Radio Shack people are so stupid.
Oh.
And I went, haha. I just
Yeah.
walked away, right?
Yeah.
And I went behind the
Wow.
counter again and started helping the next person
Yeah.
and whatever I was helping the person with. And he interrupts and he says, well, can I do this? And I look at him and I say, I'm sorry, I'm too stupid to answer that question. And he starts calling me all these words and
Oh
stuff
my
like that.
goodness.
And I look at him and I say, hey, it takes one to know one. You know?
Yeah. These are good interpersonal skills that we probably don't want to recommend for a customer service department anytime
No,
soon.
not at
But
all. We got to keep our cool. And that again, that was the wild, wild west. And that's why
mhm,
it was so refreshing to be able to work for professional
right.
organizations like FedEx or it was now the defunct Sharing Plow.
Yes, but you had to unlearn, right?
Yes.
There had to be some things you had to just unlearn. And I was listening, and there's a post recently on LinkedIn too about a person who walked right by a store because the customer service was so terrible, and he would walk an extra 10 minutes to another store that sold the same stuff
Yep.
because the customer service was better. And he
Yep.
calculated over a period of 3 or 4 years, it was like $12,000 spent in the store that was further away because people were just rude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then there was another person that, I mean, it might have been the same post, but it was similar where people would just say the wrong person is in the job. And so sometimes companies just don't get it and say, I'm going to put Harry Spate, who's the rudest person in the world, doesn't smile with anyone, and I'm going to put him at the front desk. And I've seen this over and over again where people will put someone who is completely a task oriented person to answer the phones. And
Yep.
so there's no friendliness. There's no, how can I help you? It's none of that. It's like, next. And it's like, people would tell me because I was in sales and they would say, your person that answers the phone is the rudest person in the world. And then I would try to go and tell someone and no one wanted to hear it because they're all task people. And so they just couldn't relate to this whole thing. So these are things that people do without necessarily thinking that those things that you learned years ago, those soft skills, can bring so much value to a business and get the return business. Not necessarily talking about the Radio Shack, but what you learned over your career, and you had it before. But culturally, those things impact us too. So it's
Oh, it
very
does.
interesting. Yeah.
And I would add to it too that early in my career, both with FedEx and with Sharing Plow, I remember several times as a salesperson, I would call the marketing department to let them know I'm seeing something out in the field or I had a suggestion for, how to make the product or service better. And I can't tell you, but it probably 75, 80% of the time, the response that I would get from the marketing department was, kind of like feeling like I was bothering them. And, they get that sense, going back to soft skills where it definitely came over the phone, like I was, that they had better things to do. And I remember back in those days that I promised myself that if I was in a marketing position similar to these people and a salesperson called me to give me an update or ask for some help or something like that, that I would treat them differently. And remember that. And that's what I did. And that's one of the reasons why I had such a great relationship with the various sales groups that I
Mm,
supported throughout my career, because
yeah.
I knew what they were, that, they weren't calling me just to waste my time. They were calling me because they wanted to be successful and they needed help to be the successful, or they saw something that they thought that I would needed to know. And I appreciated that. And I would, either I would act on it, or whatever it was, I'd always get back to them to let them know, hey, here's the status. Thanks again for letting me know. Either it got approved, it didn't get approved, or hey, it's moving forward. I remember when I would certain things that would get approved and I implemented them at the next sales meeting. I'd always recognize that salesperson, and I'd give that person like a Starbucks card or
Mm-hmm.
gift card, whatever it was. Those are the
Yeah.
kind of things that build relationships. And that's, guess who was the favorite person in marketing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. And so the the idea of today with businesses, when sometimes they just assume that sales and marketing just does not get along, and they just accept that it really doesn't need to be that way, does it?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what happens is it's all about egos. And
Mm,
sadly, what happens in my experience is that one department wants to be more powerful than the other department, or you have the clash of personalities, and instead of being collaborative, they want to one up each other. And it
mm-hmm.
just, it's especially on the sales side, there's so much competition out there, externally, but then also a lot of sales organizations, they're going to be recognizing their top salespeople. So inevitably, the salespeople in the organization are competing with each other to make sure that they get the top numbers. And when you have then the competition added on to that of the marketing department either being unresponsive or being more challenging to work with, that just adds to the stress unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of competition in sales. It's interesting what you just said. I've had these discussions. Is that take any world championship sports team? Where's the competition? Is the competition on the team, or is the competition on the court or the rink or the baseball diamond or the football field, right?
Yep,
There's
yep,
some competition, right, to get onto the team. But once you're on the team, right, then it's teamwork.
right,
And
right.
most people will say, well, you can't have teamwork in sales.
Not
What's
true.
your, I love it. All right, talk to me, man. Talk to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. You know what's interesting? So I'll go back to FedEx because this is a perfect example of this. We would regularly organize if someone in our team, and we had a team of 10 salespeople in our
Mm-hmm.
region,
Yeah.
reporting into a manager. If we had somebody who was struggling for whatever reason, what we would do is we would take turns either riding along with that person
Wow.
to
Yeah.
make sure that to help them. And obviously, while we're riding with the other salesperson, we're not out making sales calls ourselves in our territory. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not we're not generating additional business. But it wasn't like, oh, we're losing our opportunities, because we knew that if we did that, if we paid it forward to somebody else, that if we needed help, like let's say we wanted to do a blitz of a particular area of our
Mm-hmm.
territory, we could call in, 3 or 4 reps, and they could spend the day going and making sales calls, for cold calling for us in certain areas. So it really is something where it made for great camaraderie.
Yeah.
And it was something where I never felt like my fellow people were out to get me, or that they were trying to, that their success was going to hinder my success.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and that is it's such a great thing to do. And in sales, I remember years ago I paired up people to prospect together
Mhm.
because I figured it's so much more fun doing that,
Absolutely.
right? And then someone who was not on my team said, "Well, how can Harry do that? Because right now you have two people doing the work of one person." And my argument was, wait a minute. My guess is the two people are going to be more productive than they would be alone, right? It's one of those one and one make
Absolutely.
three type things. So,
And
so yeah,
and
you
I got
talk
a
to me.
perfect example about that, because when you have two people making a sales call, you have the opportunity for not two, but four ears. And
Mm,
what I saw time and time again, where let's say I was riding along with one of my peers, and he or she was talking to the customer or the prospect, and I'm kind of observing the call, and I all of a sudden hear something that maybe my peer didn't hear,
mm-hmm,
or I can add to the conversation. And so that has a big effect in helping further the sale. And so if you've got two people teaming up to do it and playing off of each other's strengths, you really can generate more business, because chances are, if the person was having a challenge prior, they're probably going to have a challenge in that particular sales scenario, and they're not going to close the deal. But if you've got somebody there helping you, and then that person can then come and help the other person, on a future date, it really can have a big impact. And with the fact that sales can be a very lonely job, it can be a lot of fun to be able to have somebody ride with you. In fact, I think back about many times where I just had some just fantastic times. And in fact, now that I'm thinking of it,
mm-hmm.
I remember a hilarious story that every time I think about it, it's just hysterical. So
All right.
I was in the pharmaceutical company, and we got company cars. So it was time for me, we could expense getting the car washed and things like that. So we
Mm-hmm.
were in line at one of those gas station car washes, um, and the guy in front of us, he paid, and he goes into the car wash, but he's not moving far enough along to get the thing to activate. And
Mm-hmm.
we're sitting, we're behind him, and we're just watching this, and we're thinking, what's wrong with this guy, right? Um, and so, I tap my horn and I'm trying to point to him, move forward. He doesn't understand
Uh-oh.
what I'm saying. So he rolls his window down and
Oh
he
boy.
sticks his head out. And so I stick my head out and I say, you need to roll forward a little bit more. So you know where this is going. He rolls forward a little bit more, and all of a sudden, psh, and so the two of us see this, and my friend, he says, whatever you do, don't super laugh, because even though he was really stupid and stuff, he's going to look at us thinking that we're laughing.
Right, you're the ones that caused the whole issue, right?
Exactly. And I mean,
Oops.
it was just, had I not been able to share that with
Oh
somebody,
my
it's a
goodness, yeah.
hilarious thing.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, these are stories that I was just doing this with a friend of mine when we worked together years ago, 10 years or more, and rattled off in a text. Remember this? Well, what about that? Remember this? And it was just absolute hysterics and brings you back to these great memories. So good
it is.
times.
I still have several friends, like on Facebook and LinkedIn, where we'll comment on each other's posts, and we'll actually mention something that was like a funny saying back when we were doing the sales together. And
Yeah.
it's like this, this secret language almost. It's really fun.
It is. All right, so I'm going to tell. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, but I'm going to tie it in with something that is probably relatable because you're a person that understands people. You understand stress. Well, I was working in Washington, D.C., and we had a very drab office. I mean, it was gray walls, and in the wintertime, there was no sunlight. So
Mhm.
you had the fluorescent lights, which are horrible. And the flickering lights, the gray walls. It was getting dark at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon
Yep.
because all the shadows. It was just depressing. And I'm a person that likes light.
Mhm.
So, long story short, sort of short, is I brought in a painter, I got approval to paint the walls, and I picked yellow. So, so I'm looking at these swatches, and instead of trying a wall, I, not a very bright guy in the office, I said, "Yeah, the swatches, yeah, that looks good. That yellow looks good." And one of my sales guys looks at it and he says, "Geez, Harry, I think it could be a little bit brighter." Well,
Oh.
okay, so we even go a shade or two brighter. And I said, "You think so?" Well, anyway, so this was on a Friday. We're telling the painter, so he says, "I'll paint it all this weekend, blah, blah, blah." On Monday morning, now, of course, in the morning, the sun is bright. I literally, my eyes hurt. That's how bright the walls were when the sun hit it. So then my sales team walks in one by one. It's like, and they're holding their eyes. It's like the glare is so loud on their eyes and it's hurting so bad. They're like, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to cheer up now. We are going to have good energy." And I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any remarks. So anyway, so we dealt with it and we actually got over the drabness. We didn't have to turn lights on anymore. We saved hugely on the electrical bill. So anyway, so what I was trying to do is to bring energy into the office so that we wouldn't be drab, dull, depressed. Was I on the right track there, or was I completely off base?
No, you were, because colors make a huge difference. In fact, I worked, when you were describing the gray walls and the flickering fluorescence and stuff, I thought, I immediately went back in time to a job that I had where the exact same kind of environment was there. And what I did, so when I was working at that first medical device company as a product manager, I traveled more in that job, at least overnight travel. I traveled more in that job than any other job I ever had because I had to run all the trade shows. And so what I would do is I would have to visit, I would ride with the reps, in the same areas as those trade shows were going on and stuff. So I tried to make the most out of it. But what I also did was I noticed, because I was traveling about 65% of the time, is that I wanted to get something that would help me remember the trip, why I was there. And so I started going to either professional or minor league baseball, basketball, hockey, or football
Mm,
games. And so I started a collection of pennants.
mm-hmm.
And I would have a pennant or two or three, depending on how many games I saw during a trip. And I could always get great seats because it was usually just me going to these games. Well, guess what? Those pennants have so much color. And what I would do is I would bring those pennants back and I would put them in my office instead of having the, boring, you know, diplomas or
Mm-hmm.
some generic picture up there. I had all these different pennants of all these different teams and all these different colors and everything like that. And everybody who would walk into my office, the first thing they'd say is, "Love the office. It's got so much life and color to it."
Yeah.
It really,
Yeah.
it is.
Right. It changes the energy,
It does.
right?
It
Even of
does.
your visitors. So,
Well, and you know
yeah.
what's funny with those pennants is that I now have them in my garage, hanging in my garage. And let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you, a garage is usually a pretty drab place to
Right.
be.
Right. Right.
And it just lights the whole,
Oh,
all the
that's a
way
great
around.
idea. That is a great idea because I have a drab garage. Yeah, excellent. So talk to me a little bit about so that's the tie-in because you do all of this stress management and
Mhm.
so forth. So we're talking about sales. Sales is stressful.
Very true.
Marketing can be stressful. And tell us a little bit about your story about dealing with stress and what you're doing today would be really interesting.
Sure. So the last medical device company I worked for, I unfortunately had a micromanager as somebody. And I mean, I was in my mid 50s, Harry. I was way too old to have a
Sure.
micromanager.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's like-
Right.
and so what happened was I originally had my first serious bout with stress when I was in 2008, because I had a perfect storm of stressful activities going on that culminated in my diagnosis with stress-induced diabetes. The
Hmm.
problem was I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to it. So I did what many, many entrepreneurs do. I continued to burn the candle at both
Mm.
ends
Hmm.
for another 10 years until
Wow.
I ended up in the emergency room with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for your listeners who may not know what that is, in layman's terms, my body was eating itself alive
Oh,
because of my stress. And
yeah.
here's the crazy thing. So I mentioned about the micromanager. So I had been working on a very high priority, high profile project. And I was burning the midnight oil on hours. And so what ended up happening is that I just had a physical burnout from it. And so when I went to the hospital, they immediately admitted me in from the emergency room. My glucose numbers as a diabetic were so high that the medical grade glucometers couldn't read it. It just said high. The lab estimated that my numbers were 8 to 10 times higher than they were supposed to be.
Oh.
And so they transferred me for my very first ever experience in the ICU. I mean, I'd been in the emergency room with various sports related
Hmm.
injuries, or, the kids having some sort of injuries where you're in the ER, but, it's
Hmm.
sort of like you spend a few hours there and then you leave.
Right.
This was my first extended stay in the hospital. And on my second day in the ICU, I get a text from my boss at about 6 a.m. And the text says, "You have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it?" And, if you think about it, first of all, Ace, she knew that I was in the ICU.
Oh my goodness.
Um, Secondly, I didn't have my work laptop with me because, oh, by the way, I was in the ICU. And
Oh my goodness.
so I sit there on my phone doing my best to try and reschedule this webinar, pushing the boundaries of the capabilities of this phone. And the nurse on
Oh.
staff at that time, they were checking my blood every hour, and she comes over to me and she takes my readings. And interestingly, my numbers had been coming down over the last 2 days. They were still relatively high, but much more reasonable.
Hmm.
She takes my blood sugars at that point, and it's like a 90-degree angle. My
Mm.
my blood is skyrocketing up high, and so it was my response to stress.
Wow.
And she says to me, complete stranger, she says to me, kind of like as a matter of factly, she says,
Hmm.
"You realize this is what put you in the hospital bed in the first place."
Mm.
And that was my epiphany moment, because I
Mm.
realized if I didn't do anything about my health now, I probably won't be around much longer.
Mm.
And so I spent a couple more days in the ICU. I spent, oh, I hear a dog. um, I spent a another day just contemplating what did I want to do for my career. And then what I ended up doing was I ended up deciding, what, I need to focus on my health. And so I went ahead and resigned. I started just trying to find any type of stress relief activity I could. And what I noticed was that not only did my stress go down, but my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my energy level went way, way up. It was as if I had discovered the fountain of youth. And what was amazing was that my former coworkers, friends, family, they all said, "My gosh, you look fantastic. You ought to write a book about it." And so I thought, no, okay, I'll write a book. It became a Amazon bestseller, and it just focuses on helping people, find one or two techniques that they can use regularly to help them reduce their stress. And the crazy thing is, if you look at pictures of me from 2008, when I was first diagnosed with stress induced diabetes, and you look at pictures of me now, other than the gray hair, I look younger today than I looked 14 years ago. And that's crazy. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Super.
it's a wondrous thing, and so now I just I do it as part of everything that I do. I run a landscaping business, and I teach classes online, but I also help people reduce their stress just by going and helping them discover different techniques. I've had so many different sales groups bring me in for like a 1 hour Zoom and to walk them through several ideas and stuff like that. And it's really fun to be able to give back.
Wow, that's interesting. Is there something that you could offer the listener here as to ways to reduce stress?
Yeah, so if anyone is listening in their car, the only caveat here is pull over. So just for a minute. But here's a great one, because we can all, relate to, let's say pulling up in front of the building where we have to make important sales call, or maybe we have to have a difficult conversation either with a customer, or maybe if we're a sales manager or we're a salesperson and we have to have a conversation with our manager, or we're the manager and we have to have a difficult conversation with somebody who reports to us. Whatever that happens to be, this is a great technique to help get you grounded. And what it is it's called Hakalau, and it's a very short meditation that comes from the Hawaiian culture. And all you have to do is go ahead, if you do this with me, Harry, find a spot on the wall in front of you, preferably above eye level, a stationary spot, and just start staring at that spot. And as you stare at that spot, notice, you just let your mind go loose and focus all of your attention on that spot. And after a matter of moments, you'll notice that your vision starts to spread out and you see more in the peripheral than you do in the central part of your vision. And what I
Yeah.
want you to do is just focus on the peripheral. In fact, pay more attention to the peripheral than the central part of your vision. And stay in that state for a few more seconds. Notice how it feels. And then go ahead and close your eyes, open them back up, come back into this room, and notice that you're more aware of your surroundings and you're more grounded and you're better prepared to take on that important presentation, conversation, what have you.
Okay. So I really that's weird. Because you're thinking that when you want to focus on it, that you want to close out the peripheral,
Mm-hmm. And this
right?
is the
And
opposite.
yeah, and then it's like, wow, I didn't realize I had so much peripheral vision.
You do,
Yeah.
because what happens is when you take in, especially let's say if you were right about before you're taking the stage for a presentation, if you take in your peripheral vision, you realize that you're more in contact with everything going on around you. And the reality is, when we feel more in control of what's going on around us, we tend to reduce our stress because our natural human nature is that when we feel more in control, when we feel like, we are aware of our surroundings and everything going on, naturally stress goes down. And so, and it's just a great grounding exercise.
I love it. So, what are you doing today with this and helping people? Because I know you've done a ton of volunteer work. Is this part of your business doing this, or talk to me about that?
So I do a lot of volunteer work. The business end of it comes when I work with various groups. They have me come in, like I said, for maybe an hour presentation on this. Also, one-on-one coaching that I'll do with individuals if they need it. But most of the time it is, having quick conversations with people, and hey, what's stressing you out, and giving them a suggestion to try something. But the reality is, the reason why my book has over 100 techniques in it is because something that works for me may not work necessarily for you, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
what's great is the vast majority of those techniques literally do take 5 minutes or less. And so you try one. If it works, fantastic, run with it. If
Yeah.
it doesn't, big deal. Took you just a couple of minutes, try another one next time. The bottom line is, find something that works for you and utilize it on a daily basis, because if you use it on a daily basis, the compound benefits over time will be enormous because it becomes a habit. But you have to start today. That's the key.
Yeah, this is great advice. I mean, I was just, I forgot who I was watching recently, some YouTube video of a fellow who is pretty famous, but he talks about the 4-7-8 method. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, deep breathing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I didn't get a lot out of it. I mean, that might be one of those examples where it just may not work for me that well. So I kept doing like multiples of the 4-7-8. It's like, okay, if I do it 3 times, right? So 12, maybe, I'm gonna. But so yeah, it really depends on the individual. It sounds like.
It really does. And I've
Yeah.
had so much feedback from individuals who've, when I do my blog posts on different techniques, and they'll tell me, oh my God, this one worked, it's great and stuff. And sometimes it surprises me, because the ones that don't work for me, I still write about them, because just because it doesn't work necessarily for me doesn't mean it won't work for somebody else. And a great example of that was meditation. I've gotten better at meditation over the time, but it's still not my go-to activity. And there are 3, 4, 500-page books on meditation. And it's like, the reality is, yeah, I mean, but most of us might have a busy mind. And so
Yeah.
I've realized that, okay, my busy mind, it is what it is. If I can come back to whatever my activity is in the meditation, that's okay. But if I'm really going to do something that I need to ground myself on, I might do that hakalao like we just did. I might do a visualization exercise. And one of my all-time favorites, that is my number one stress relief tool, is gratitude. And that's something that we all need to have gratitude for. And whether we're in sales, marketing, there's always going to be those stressful things going on. But the reality is, if somebody is not happy at work, if unless they're in the financial position to leave and look for something else, what I always recommend to them, as if you know that you need to make the move to leave that job, while you're still there, have gratitude for that job. We can all find 5 to 10 things on a daily basis that we can be grateful for. And it could be as simple as, I'm grateful for the health benefits, or the salary that helps me pay my bills, or the
Right.
friends I have at work, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Because if we focus on the negative, the problem is, when we send out that, whatever that energy is that we send out to the universe, that's the kind of energy we're going to attract back. And so if we are focused on whatever is wrong with our job, etc., then we're going to attract back negative energy. But if we're grateful for certain things, my wife and I, we do it on a nightly basis. We just, we recap our day, and I ask her, what are you grateful for? And she asks me, what am I grateful for? And we just recap what it is. And mine every time is, I'm grateful for my health, because all else is secondary, knowing once, that I didn't have my health. And that's something that too many of us take for granted. And, I always like to tell people, if you don't believe me how important your health is, think about the last time you were really, really sick, like with the flu or COVID or whatever it happened to be.
Right.
Did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed? Probably not. And when you were just lying in bed with no energy to do anything else, you're no good to your company you work for. You're no good to the business you run. You're no good to the people that you care about in your life. You're no good to anybody. So don't take your health for granted. Don't trade it. Don't trade your health for your career, because that's a really bad trade.
It is. Absolutely. Baby, you're no good. Baby, there's a song. It's Baby, you're no good. Dude, I can't get the picture of you punting a toy organ across the room out of my mind, but this is helping, because I'm listening to this guy saying all about stress relief. So a few decades ago, you needed the later Professor Pete to talk to that young man.
That's exactly it. But part of why I did that was to make my coworkers laugh as well. They thought it was the most hysterical thing. And those organs were just these cheap plastic crap.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nothing too heavy. You might have hurt the foot or something.
Exactly.
Then you'd have been in the emergency room for another reason. So,
well, it was so funny too, because I'd always take the batteries out of it, and then the manager in the store would always put the batteries back in, because, we're not going to sell any of them if it doesn't have the batteries. And so then I would hear it, and it's like,
Oh my goodness, more silliness. But yeah, Professor Pete, you are awesome. Love the advice that you're giving. So you really helped us today on sales, the soft skills, dealing with people appropriately, recognizing the value of the brand, the mission, so much good stuff. And then tying it all in is like, we got to have balance here in life, right? I mean, otherwise we're going to be short-lived and not get to enjoy it and help others as much. So any final thoughts, Professor Pete?
Yeah, I would just say with that note on balance, whatever that balance is, it's different for each person. So let's say for one person, they want to get 50% balance with friends and family and 50% balance with their career. But there might be others who say, hey, I need 90% of my time with my career and 10% with my, family or friends. And all I say is, whatever works for you that feels right to yourself based on your own personal values, that is absolutely right. But if you are in the 90 to 10, like 90% career, 10% in with your friends and family, make sure that 10% is quality time. That's the key, because just, we've all seen at restaurants pre-COVID, even after COVID, where you have people sitting around the table, you look at them and everybody's on their phone. That's not quality time. That's physical time, right?
Yeah, right?
So make sure it's quality time.
Yeah.
And make the most of it.
That's great. And where can people find you, sir?
Best place to find me is on my website, petealexander.com. That's where I have all those different stress relief tools and techniques. And they can also reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn.
Outstanding. Well, be sure to do that. You'll be in for not only some laughs, but you'll also be in for some great advice. Very helpful individual. And by the way, he will support you. So thank you for your support, Professor Pete. This has been a real blast. So thanks for showing up on the Sales Made Easy podcast, my friend.
Well, Harry, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate your listeners' time.
All right. Great stuff. Man, sales is tough. I'm just not cut out to be a salesperson. Have you ever felt that way? Selling doesn't need to be so difficult. My name is Harry Spate, I'm here to serve and to help you succeed. Join me as we discuss sales made easy.